it works. All right, 3, 2, 1. Hello, everyone. Welcome to Downstage with Bryan Hayden for this week of 11. Oh, I'm about to say this week. A new month, a new year. I was about to say a new month, new year. New month. We're totally into summer now, which is amazing, considering we just started doing this podcast version of Call Time. Well, not a Call Time, but it was like a sister. It's like a offshoot of the actual podcast, but whatnot. But
it's the second cousin twice removed.
Yes, it's amazing how a couple of months ago we just started doing this thing as a way to. You all might not notice this, but I'm currently trying to figure out why my camera is fidgety right now. So for some reason my camera is shaky and or slow. But yeah, we'll work with it. We'll deal with it as we say in theater. But yeah,
we'll fix it in post.
Yeah, we'll fix it in post if we can. But yeah, this week. Sadly, we start with some sad news this week. Stephen Sondheim, famous musical producer on Broadway, unfortunately passed away just right after Thanksgiving. So yeah, that was kind of a big blow to hear. Is like what was it? I think it was on either Twitter or Facebook, and I just read, no, I think it was on Twitter, and it says, "Oh, Stephen Sondheim passed away." I'm like, really? Wow. And again, I'm not like a big musical person, so I don't really, listen to musicals. I don't watch musicals, but from time to time, I do listen to musicals, or I should say, watch musicals, I should say. And some of the musicals that Sondheim has done over his career, like West Side Story, Sweeney Todd. Those are kind of mainstay movies that I've seen or productions I've seen in the past. I think he also did In the Woods too. So, yeah, but yeah, a big blow in musical theater, especially musical theater. I know a lot of my actors and actresses. I know my actor and actress friends, and also theater people essentially. Were very blown to hear that of Sondheim's passing. So, Hayden, do you have any thoughts or memories of Sondheim in general?
Not really. If anything, I'm basically just gonna be echoing the same thing you said because, I'm not a big musical person like a lot of other people I knew, and yeah, as I saw from a lot of my fellow musical theater friends, it definitely hit them hard.
Yeah, especially.
And, I mean, of course, it is hard when anyone dies.
Yeah.
Or passes away, I should say, or whatever terminology one prefers. But yeah, it's it is tragic, and yeah.
Yeah.
A musical theater icon has gone into the void.
Yes, and. And what's sad was that apparently he was gearing up for another production that he wanted to do. It's he had one more big show in him, and he literally just did a CBS interview with not Dateline, but one of those shows essentially on CBS. Mm-hmm. It wasn't 60 Minutes that I know of, but it was basically some CBS show, and they literally say he was doing fine, he was doing everything, and then it's next day he just passes away. So yeah. Mm-hmm. Stephen Sondheim, great legend. Even if you weren't a musical theater person like I am, or like you are, but you are in theater and of acting, and if you're an actor and you kind of know of Stephen Sondheim, you have a big presence to essentially that will be missed essentially. Mm-hmm. And speaking of theater, so I just saw this story last night, but apparently you know more about it first half. So there was a actor or a performer from the national touring of Jesus Christ Superstar who was arrested by the FBI because he was part of the insurrection that happened in I keep on saying July, in January. So you know more about it because apparently you were just talking about how crazy it was. But I just read the story last night, and it does sound like it sounds crazy, but also doesn't sound like it actually happened. So apparently the FBI was looking for this guy or looking for suspects, and one of the suspects just happened to be wearing a Michael Jackson jacket or something like that.
Mm.
And yeah, I think it's probably best that you talk about, because you were just talking about it more in detail and more like, oh, it's like one of those stories you just have to hear.
Mm-hmm. So basically, it kind of goes like this, like this actor was, was there on January 6th, part of the insurrection, and the FBI's been trying to ID people, and this guy had his mask on, so they couldn't, use Face ID that much. But
Gotcha.
What they could distinguish was his Michael Jackson jacket, because I believe he was wearing on the day of, and then he was seen much later on in social media photos with that same jacket on. So then I got the FBI wondering, hey, was this guy one of the people who was involved in insurrection that day? So they find out he is a musical theater performer, that he's touring, and they basically spend a couple of weeks going to the Jesus Christ Superstar shows. I think it was like maybe Wisconsin or something at the time, or it might have been before they went to Wisconsin, so wherever they were right before that. And they were basically just watching the performances for like a couple of weeks to kind of be like, okay, is this the guy we're looking for? Is that the guy we're looking for? And then that's when they figured out, yes, it was the guy they were looking for, and then they arrested him.
It's like, could you imagine? One, that does sound like it's almost like a setup for I won't say like it's a comedy skit or something like that. But it's like it's a setup for a weird skit you would see on like some sketch comedy show on TV, where it's just like, especially if it's like, one, it's a setup of one, we already know that some actors or some musicians have been at that, insurrection, Capitol riot, whatever you call it.
The QAnon shaman was an actor before he became the QAnon shaman, essentially. So yeah, it's.
Yeah. But could you imagine, like, you're part of the FBI and it's like, okay, who am I looking for this week? And I'm not joshing the FBI, believe me. But it's just the idea of the next few weeks, the FBI, FBI agents going to the same performance of Jesus Christ Superstar, seeing if this is the guy that was their suspect. And one, you have to imagine, it's like, this is probably like either the easiest catch for them, because one, you're going to see a performance, like a rather good performance too. Jesus Christ Superstar is like one of those, again, musical, like one of those famous musicals. But at the same time, I'm just like, they have to be like, okay, this is probably the most easiest catch. We're seeing a show essentially for, well, I wouldn't say free, but they're buying tickets. One that they're paying tickets to see, all that stuff. But then I'm like,
and those tickets are just basically being filed under the expense reports. It's like, no, yeah, this was absolutely necessary. We had to go and see this show so many times. Like, I like to think, like, when they're talking to their boss the next day afterwards, like, oh my gosh, that was a great show, but we're not sure if it's our guy. Maybe we should go see it again. Yeah.
And and it gets better too, because when you said Michael Jackson jacket, I thought we were like the red jacket that he always wore. Apparently, it was like the Michael Jackson bad jacket that he had. Apparently, from like the world tour from like '87. That's what it says. So, and yeah, I just imagine like whatever bar is just looking at the 2 agents or 3 agents or how many agents that we're going to see. Is like, one, what agent will be interested to go and see I keep saying Broadway musical, but a musical almost like for essentially 3 weeks. 2, who is going to be their partner who would be the musical, who would be the one that doesn't like the musical? Or, is it, like, again, this does sound like a setup to a buddy cop movie where it's just like you have the cop who loves the musicals and you have the cop who doesn't love the musicals, and they're kind of like and they're literally at this theater for 3 weeks, 4 weeks, what have you, looking for the suspect to see if this is the suspect of of a suspect and whatnot, and going. You gotta have that one cop who looks like he's just enjoying just watching this, and the one cop is just like, how long is this gonna be? Because again, it's like, but the most funniest thing about this, the actor who was caught and arrested, he was playing Judas. That's the most funniest part of this whole story.
The irony of it all is amazing.
The irony of it all is that this actor, Beeks. No. Apparently, yeah. Oh, apparently his name is also Justice or something to that effect. Played the character of Judas. So, like, I'm just like, first off, when I was reading that last night, I'm like, that can't be real. I was like, you got the guy who was playing Judas ending up being arrested. I'm like, that's just poetic.
Mm-hmm.
But yeah.
It's like I like to think like when the agents finally were like, okay, we're gonna arrest him. It's like it's right after the performance. They're like, hey, would you mind signing our playbill? You'll give us an autograph. Oh, and by the way, would you also mind autographing these handcuffs before we arrest you? Like I like to think it was something like that, or that could be how the buddy cop version goes.
Oh, I'm just reading the article about what's happened, and it says it gets better. Beeks had an additional connection to Michael Jackson, the indictment says. According to his LinkedIn profile and YouTube page, Beeks regularly performed as a Michael Jackson impersonator. Okay, not only, this does sound like a setup to an actual comedy. Where it's like, I mean, the context of what happened on January, that's horrific enough, Mm-hmm. There was a friggin' riot, and both a riot and an insurrection happening at the same time. But when one of the suspects is a Michael Jackson impersonator who's also playing Judas on a production of on Jesus Christ Superstar, that leads itself to like almost a comedic aspect. Excuse me for a second. I'm hearing cats and.
Yeah, it's that too. I thought that was like my cat for a second. I'm like, no, that sounds fainter.
No, that's just the cats in the backyard. We have alley cats who live around here, and for the past few nights or so, they've been yelling at each other in heat, or as one of my friends were joking, they were probably performing Cats, and we just don't know it. So they're probably screeching out the lyrics to Memories now. But yeah, you have to imagine, like, the people who are even in that show right now going, wait, the guy playing Judas ended up being an actual Judas in real life. Because it's like that's like poetics right there, especially in theater. I mean, not only, yeah, it's like that's like this type of story you would read and go, this isn't really The Onion, isn't it? And then you just like, and you find out that this is actually happening in real life. It's like, it's again, it's just the
Onion articles are basically just real life articles at this point.
Yeah, it's just the idea of this guy who ended up being a suspect who ended up being performing as Judas in Jesus Christ Superstar, and it's like, it's just like that type of stuff that you just can't make up. And like, and just to find him because of his connection to Michael Jackson, which is even more amazing because he, has performed as a Michael Jackson impersonator. It's like, it's just like, how does that? It's like, it just feels like it doesn't feel like an actual headline. I mean, it does feel like an actual headline, but to the layman, it just sounds like, oh, it was this probably hiding out now as an actor or something like that. But as an actor and as a writer too, it sounds like the setup to a great buddy a great buddy cop movie where it's about two cops or two agents and whatnot who have to sit through musical after musical to find this suspect who just happens to be an actor. So yes.
And by the end of it, the one who hated the musicals ends up shouting those lyrics the loudest.
Mm-hmm. But yeah, I was just amazed to find that thing, like that article last night. So it's like it's like one of those things, like when you find out when one of your former college classmates ends up being arrested, and you kind of like, yeah, it kind of makes sense now. So the idea of someone being arrested and also playing the role of Judas, I'm like, yeah, it kind of makes sense. All right. Yeah, I was kind of like at a loss for words, especially when I was reading the story, and I'm still at a loss for words because that still doesn't feel like it's a real story, but it is a real story.
Yeah.
Props to the agents who actually had to sit through that performance for like at least 3 weeks. Was I was an usher for for several shows, and probably none as a musical, but singing in a musical for. I mean, I've only done like one musical as an usher, but I don't see myself, going to the same performance like day in, day out, like every other day. It's like, it's literally one of those like chores, because there are people who will go and see. Because again, I have actor friends who go see musicals, especially the same musical, and they love the musical. But there's also people who probably only have a tendency or a talent for like a musical, maybe every once in a while. I'm one of those people who has talent for musicals for once in a while. But props to the Asians who had the tendency to go and shadow this guy for 3 weeks and go into the same musical like every other week or every day or what have you. Like, do they have to wear this? That even raises us a question. Did they even bring disguises to each performance? Like,
I mean, would they need to though? I mean, because it's not like anyone in the well, especially depending on the size of the theater, it's not like anyone in the cast is actually going to be able to tell who's actually in the audience, and then.
Yeah, that's true. Like once the lights off, it's like you could barely see who's in the audience anyway.
Exactly, and then even if they're like, because I don't know if they were, I was joking earlier about if they're like doing this kind of like curtain call greetings or whatever, but I don't know if that cast was doing that. Although I assume they probably would, because it's a Broadway show, and normally they'll kind of like just say hey to people who are just kind of hanging around afterwards, who are like waiting for the cast, whatever. But like, yeah, like I doubt they would actually need disguises. Just like wear different suits.
Yeah, or
other
just
than that, I mean,
different, just like street clothing.
Yeah.
Well, yeah.
There's an episode for the buddy cop thing. They show up wearing random mascot outfits.
But yeah, it's like, again, I just see it as the humor. I see the humor as an actor, because it's just like one of those stories you hear like, oh, of course, like somehow, but it just sounds like one of those stories you would just hear on like The Onion, but it ends up being an actual story. So it's like, and shout out to the subreddit, not The Onion. So it's like that's not affiliated with them, but just shout out to them. But what else? But yeah, it's amazing. And speaking of amazing, and going to my next segue. So Amy Pascal, Amazing Amy, has said that Tom Holland is still signed on for Spider-Man for the next 3 more movies, so a new trilogy. Like, they're not done with him yet, which makes sense because it's.
Yeah, like I think I remember who it was that someone said before that Spider-Man is now the soul of the MCU essentially.
Yeah, but also it's like without Spider-Man for Sony, they wouldn't really have that many like things to do. It's like Venom would work, but Venom only works because of Spider-Man. So and whatchamacallit, and you got them doing.
And then
like,
they also got Morbius that's coming out, but like I doubt that's actually going to do too good at the box office compared to, you know, if it was a Spider-Man movie.
I mean, it is coming out in January, so it's like, or February. I'm not remember, but it is coming out in one of those dump months that we talked about last week. So, and depending on what's coming out before or after, it might do good. It might not do good. Ooh, excuse me. I just had my lunch before, so yeah, and yeah, I literally ate lunch like 2 hours ago. So. But yeah, Amazing Amy said that Tom Holland has at least another 3 movies in him, or they're thinking about using him for another 3 movies, so a new trilogy. Which I do hope, if they are doing a new trilogy, at least age him up to a point where it's just like it does feel like he's not still in high school and stuff like that too. Because
like at least have him in college, or
not even college, just like have him as a normal like person and whatnot. It's like, and like that was the genius of the Spider-Man PS4 game, where it's like you don't see him as this high school kid anymore or college kid anymore. He's just is a full-grown adult with his own problems. So I would love to see Spider-Man. It's not like in Spider-Man 2 where he's like in a very ratty-ass apartment, with a landlord always asking for his rent and whatnot, and then and he somehow has like the hot chick, daughters who's always pining after him, but still have him actually with a real life job. It could be like have him as a photographer, not as a Daily Bugle, but or something like that, or have him as a scientist. Like if you want to have Peter Parker like really start to,
and that could be a good way to introduce Dr. Connors into that universe.
Yeah. He'd be working with Dr. Connors because of, Peter just needed to go to an apprenticeship, and he just happened to be working with Dr. Connors. And Dr. Connors could be like, he. And I think that's another thing about the MCU is this, like, especially with Spider-Man, is like all these MCU villains are connected to the main heroes, essentially. And for Spider-Man, like, the focus for Spider-Man has always been like science for amok and whatnot. Like Green Goblin, like how Green Goblin's whole thing was that he just happened to inhale or ingest some drug into him that essentially made him insane and also goblin-like or what have you. Well, it just made him insane, but also just strong and whatnot.
And then Otto Octavius, Doc Ock, trying to create that self-sustaining power source thing with the tritium, I think it was called. Then he got the whatever it's called, those claw tentacle things, whatever they're called, whatever you really call them. Like, and then science again there. The only one where you don't really see science per se run amok is, well, it kind of in Spider-Man 3, but it's more like but it's like Flint Marko just stumbled onto this science thing on accident, and then so I guess it is still kind of science run amok. But I feel like because of that is definitely all in a sense of a lot of what the Spider-Man villains are. Even in the even in Amazing Spider-Man, that's science run amok with Dr. Connors becoming a lizard there. Then you also actually kind of have science running amok, ironically enough, in Amazing Spider-Man 2, when Harry Osborn's trying to find a cure for his genetic disease, and then also kind of, I guess, with what happens to Electro.
Yeah.
And then even in the MCU Spider-Man movies, who kind of have that to a degree. Because you got Vulture with the alien tech, and I guess that's, because that's very sci-fi. That's science now running amok in a very literal sense now, too. And Mysterio as well, actually, yeah. It's literally, Spider-Man could literally be summed up as everyone just screwing around with science.
Maybe J. Jonah Jameson has a point. Spider-Man is a mess.
Yeah.
I need photos of Spider-Man.
But yeah, it just brings a question. Is like, if they do a new trilogy of Spider-Man, I would love to see Spider-Man or Peter Parker. Well, I should just say Peter Parker. Like Peter Parker, like literally just being a regular guy who essentially is just trying to like literally go day by day and just trying to be like trying to both own up his responsibilities and his powers and responsibilities as both Peter Parker and as Spider-Man, and also bring back the whole notion of essentially that not only science run amok, but also just having it connect to Spider-Man per se, or just less more about the MCU as a whole, because I think that's what really makes that's what really makes the MCU movies great, especially if it's like a standalone movie. Like Shang-Chi was great on itself because it doesn't really connect, overall to the MCU outside of maybe a couple of cameos. Like Wong and the Abomination, like that's great, but the whole movie by itself is essentially its own thing. Mm-hmm.
It's like what Spider-Man says in Infinity War. Can't save a neighborhood if there's no neighborhood. Yeah. And that's essentially who Spider-Man is. He's just the neighborhood hero. Literally it is. He's the friendly neighborhood Spider-Man.
Yeah. And it just goes to show you, like, but if they do a new trilogy, and of course they probably will do a new trilogy, because again, as we were just saying, aside from Venom, who only works with Spider-Man, I don't really see that these Sony Universe Marvel products doing good regardless, even if Spider-Man is in their movie. It's like you need to have Spider-Man in these movies. It's like, first off, it's like there is a Kraven the Hunter movie. First off, why would you do a Kraven the Hunter movie if Kraven the Hunter isn't hunting Spider-Man for himself? That's it's literally his main thing. It's sort of like Bane coming into a Batman movie without, well, one, breaking the bat, and two, going to a point where he isn't making Gotham City a war zone of itself by essentially destroying both Arkham Asylum and Blackgate and releasing everybody into the city to amidst chaos. Because again, Bane is a very fascinating character, both from a writer standpoint and also from a character standpoint. Kraven, his whole shtick is that he wants to hunt down Spider-Man, and it's his last. I think he's also slowly dying, so his last great hunt is literally hunting down Spider-Man.
Exactly. It's all about the glory for him.
Yeah.
So it's like, why would you have a movie where he's not hunting Spider-Man? And if they're trying to, it feels like if they're doing a Kraven the Hunter movie where he's essentially the protagonist, then they're trying to, I guess, change that perception of the character in a sense to try and make it seem like he's more of an anti-hero. And I'm just thinking that's not a good character to really do that with, because they tried that in one of the Spider-Man video games. I think it was Amazing Spider-Man 2, where Kraven the Hunter shows up and Spider-Man fights alongside him until eventually it's revealed that, oh yeah, Kraven the Hunter wants to hunt Spider-Man because, duh, it's Kraven the Hunter. Anyone who is familiar enough with the characters knows that that's what his end goal is. Yeah, so it's like when they tried to do that plot twist with Mysterio, having us think, oh no, maybe he's a good guy. It's Mysterio. We know who he is. We know he's not actually going to be the good guy. We know it's going to be a plot twist, and he's going to be revealed to be the bad guy.
And you hire Jake Gyllenhaal to be him. It's like, come on, he's going to be the villain. It's trying to have Jake Gyllenhaal play the main hero, and he has played the main hero before. But when you play him as the villain, it's like you kind of get the sensation of, oh, Jake Gyllenhaal as a villain, he's going to play the villain.
Mm-hmm. Exactly, a great film that kind of sums up a lot of what Jake Gyllenhaal, I think, is kind of playing more of now. Nightcrawler.
Oh yeah,
that kind of summarizes a lot of roles that Jake Gyllenhaal has been playing for a while now.
Yeah, but yeah, it's just weird trying to see where they go with a MCU Spider-Man, while at the same time Sony has really trying to figure out what they're doing with their own Spider-Verse without like Spider-Man in them. And because it's like
or really their Venomverse in this case.
Yeah, Venomverse, because I think that's probably into the Venomverse, or Venomverse, or however Tom Hardy would say it. No. But
you don't want me to do you don't want me to do a voice?
No. But
you sure?
Yeah. But yeah, it does just feel like Sony is trying to grasp as much as they can with Spider-Man, because if they aren't making a Spider-Man movie like within the span of like a couple of years or something like that, the rights automatically go back to Marvel. And it's how a lot of these films are essentially like, Hellraiser. It's a fantastic thing for that because Hellraiser has been a Miramax Dimension Films property for the past, like, say, 25 years, close to it, before it got switched to another, before I think Clive Barker was able to get the rights to it, and Hulu was able to get the rights to it, or something to that effect. But for a period of, say, like 20 years or so, Pinhead was essentially made into, like 5 movies in a span of 20 years. Like every 5 years or so, it'd be like, it's like they did, Bloodline, which was the last theatrical movie, right? And then after a few years, nothing really happened, and then suddenly they do a direct-to-video thing. And then after a couple of years, another direct-to-video thing. And after a couple of years, another direct-to-video thing. And then so forth and so on. And then you get essentially 2 more movies that were essentially the same thing, where it's just like, the rights are about to release. And then suddenly, they do their own version. They do another version of Hellraiser. And another version of Hellraiser, until finally it's like, okay. And then the Weinstein stuff happened, and then that's probably when everything got like back into the notion of like rights going back to and whatnot. So yeah, it's like the same thing with Hellraiser, where it's just like Sony's that keep Spider-Man characters here for them's sake. So every few years or so, they just got to keep on trying to build up their own like Spider-Verse without Spider-Man, or the Spider-Man less verse.
I think part of it is definitely that is Sony trying to keep a hold of the rights so it doesn't go over to Marvel and Disney. But I think it's also because Sony realizes that Spider-Man is their big money maker. It's all like Spider-Man's always been their big money maker, and at the rate they're going, it's always going to be their big money maker. But yeah, they'll make some money with Venom, but not as much as if as if it's Spider-Man. And then like Morbius, like that's not going to make as much as a Spider-Man movie. Like I think we can already kind of predict that now.
Yeah,
because a lot of what Sony has come out with, it's like, it's all cool, it's whatever, but yes, Sony is their bread and it's not Sony. Spider-Man is Sony's bread and butter.
Yeah, and
they will definitely want to try and like keep a hold of that for as long as they possibly can.
Yeah, it's like the same thing with X-Men and Fox. For say from like 2000 to like 2019 or so. Or around there, I forgot when Dark Phoenix came out, but for essentially 20 years or so, for essentially 20 years or so, X-Men was the bread and butter of Fox. When they tried to do when they tried to do in Fantastic Four, like the first 2 movies were good on its own. Like the first movie was like, in its own way, a great version of a comic book movie. Then they do Rise of the Silver Surfer, and they do the stuff with the Galactus, and that's
and they don't really do anything with Galactus to begin with, anyway.
Yeah, Galactus is like literally just a head in the clouds, like
literally only like 30 seconds, I think, of like screen time, and Silver Surfer literally just goes like mouth first into him, so to speak. Like, that's literally what happens, and it's like, well. okay, guess that problem solved somehow.
Yeah, and then we all know what happened to Fantastic. So and
Fantastic.
Fantastic. Remember that movie, kids? No, it's 5 years, 6 years actually. But yeah, it's
nope.
like
I don't know what you're talking about. What Fantastic?
But yeah, you know, it's like when they tried doing their own stuff that wasn't X-Men, or specifically X-Men related to their own Marvel stuff. So and that was the only thing, is that 20th Century Fox only had 2 properties that they could probably do, and they could probably and Deadpool. But Deadpool it's its own case because Deadpool is practically Ryan Reynolds' own production thing.
Exactly, it's just Ryan Reynolds making his dream come true.
Yeah, it's not really connected to the X-Men. It's like, yes, it's connected to the X-Men because, you know, Deadpool is somewhat connected to the X-Men because of but and even that like he always, and even that he jokes about not the X-Men not being in that thing because of, you know, how many people they could hire as an X-Men.
Yeah.
But still, Deadpool is connected to the X-Men because, you know, if you look at the comics, he is, you know, he was with Logan getting the Weapon X stuff, and they do that with X-Men Origins. But I think the problem was that whenever they tried to do something that was X-Men diverted into something like, say, X-Men Origins or First Class. Well, First Class was excellent, by the way. But and they should have done Second Class and Third Class and or what have you. But
yeah, like X-Men freshman year, then sophomore year, junior year, senior year.
Yes. But they kind of like really screwed themselves up when they did Days of Future Past, which is an amazing storyline to do because it's essentially their version of like the Terminator, and then suddenly they kind of like screw it up because of not only do they have, you know, well, one, you have someone like Elliot Page's character, Shadowcat. Was it Shadowcat?
Yeah, Shadowcat.
Yeah, I forgot what. And Kitty Pryde, right? Elliot Page's character, Kitty Pryde, doing nothing really outside of just putting hands on Logan so Logan could go back to the past. One, if you have the power to essentially go back in time, why don't you just have Kitty Pryde do that, and then suddenly it's like, oh, it's like suddenly it's like you could actually do the possibility, but you know.
Well, it's also because the story reasons they created. It's like you can only go back so far into that specific person's past.
Yeah.
So it's like that. So at least they did kind of build in a story reason for why it had to be Logan.
Yeah, at least Logan's been around here since like what, the 1800s or so. It's like, oh yeah, you could easily do it with Logan, and also they could, you know, say, oh, it's Logan's healing a factor that could why he could, you know, go back and further in time and stuff like that too. But
also because he would have been alive during that time, so they can go back into that past. Because they tried to do it with any other character. Essentially, it's like you're either going back to Magneto's past where he's imprisoned and he can't escape, or you're going back to Charles Logan.
Yeah.
Not Charles. No, Charles Xavier. I don't know why I said Charles Logan. So many X-Men names. I'm just mixing it all up here. But yeah, but if you're talking about Charles Xavier past, then you just get the problem of I wasn't the same person I was back then, possibly, or.
And that's another thing is like,
and also the fact that it's like the fact that Charles Xavier's a telepath, and then how would that mess things up?
Yeah.
When you're trying to go back to that person's past.
Yeah.
And one more thing, how does Kitty Pryde have that power? Like, how is it she has the power to phase through walls, but then also apparently be able to help, like, rewind time or send people back into time? This is actually why I like the Rogue cut, because it kind of could make sense why Rogue could have that powers, because it's Rogue. She could have touched another metahuman, or whatever, if that's what they call them, and then mutant. I'm mixing up with DC. Ugh. She could have, touched a mutant and then gained that power.
Yes, but
again, then yeah.
Yeah, it's again, it's probably even. It probably explains a lot more better in the comics too. It's like how Kitty is able to do all this stuff, and then and that's another thing is like you could, if Kitty somehow was able to do this in X-Men: The Last Stand, or start to figure out she could do this in The Last Stand, and then suddenly you get this whole like plot going forward. It's like, oh snap, not only could Kitty like literally phase through walls, she could actually phase through time itself, and that could like literally open up a possibility and all that stuff. And she could siphon off of Professor X and Magneto's help, and send her back into the past because she's essentially connecting through their memories and stuff like that too. So she could essentially phase through time and stuff like that too. But again, it's like and this is just like one what if possibility, because two, everything about the Days of Future Past, especially in the future, like they really don't do anything much with the future part of everything. They try to make it like, oh, it's like it's
just a desolate like wasteland ruled by the machines essentially, who are all hunting down the mutants.
Yeah, and again, and that's a problem is like, and that's the problem too. It's this that they don't build up to that. It's like, oh yeah, it's the Sentinels, and it's like all the fans would know what the Sentinels are. It's like, as a comic fan, I barely remember what the Sentinels were outside of the cartoon. And
exactly, yeah. Like there's actually an animated show. I think it was like, funny enough, I think it came out like Nicktoons or Nickelodeon, something like that. It was called Wolverine and the X-Men, and it literally starts off with essentially being like, Charles Xavier got sent to the future, but also his present day body is just in a coma essentially in the present day. But he's able to also be in the future, but he has a physical body in the future, and he takes these things to run. And it's like it does a better job showcasing of what living in that future world is like. That is essentially run by Sentinels and people trying to imprison and capture mutants.
Yeah, and
while then also balancing out with the fact that it's like events in the past do then have an effect on the future. Like there's one episode where Wolverine gets captured and they experiment on him, and then in the future we see these Sentinel robots that have Wolverine's claws.
Yeah, and what relates back to Sony trying to do, Sony essentially grasping with whatever Spider-Man characters that they have, at least with Fox, they all felt like Spider-Man characters. They all felt like X-Men characters, Well, outside of characters being killed off rather almost like gratuitously, and characters not being written correctly. At least when they were not written correctly, they did feel like characters, like they actually did feel like the characters that they were, portraying as.
Exactly.
At least with that. But with Sony, it's like they have this like, oh, we got Venom, we got Carnage, we got Kraven the Hunter, we got Morbius, we got Madam Web, we got all these other things. And what really makes these characters great together is being with the common factor of Spider-Man.
Mm-hmm.
And the common factor with X-Men was that these characters were all X-Men.
Mm-hmm.
They were all friends, they were all family, they were all what have you. The common factor what Sony's trying to do with Spider-Man less characters, trying to make them into their own characters. Like Venom, I can understand, because Venom on its own is a great character. But Morbius works because he is a Spider-Man character too, because he's a doctor who focuses on healing himself, but ends up becoming a plasma drinking vampire. So, and Madam Web, Kraven the Hunter, both Spider-Man characters and both connected to Spider-Man, especially Madam Web. Madam Web is a person who literally helped Spider-Man into guiding into the multiverse.
Exactly.
And when you do like all these like Silver Sable is a character who might work on her own. Black Cat could work on her own possibly, but a lot of these characters are very focused on Spider-Man, and
because their stories have always been so integral around Spider-Man for so long. So it's like,
it's like
the only exception, actually, when I think about it, the only exception with Kraven the Hunter as a movie I could be okay with is if they cast Nicolas Cage as Kraven.
Yes, but they cast Aaron Taylor Johnson, who I don't know. I mean, he is bulked up. He is pretty bulk to play Kraven, but it's just like it's just a very weird casting to do. It's like maybe they'll change everything. I don't know. It's like, but
I mean, I guess if we're going for a younger Kraven.
Yeah, but maybe we'll get to see Nicolas Cage as Kraven Hunter someday soon in the MCU. I don't know. But speaking of the MCU and Spider-Man, so yeah, Far From Home or No Way Home, whatever it's called.
It's No Way Home.
Yeah, Homeward Bound. So No Way Home. There was a crazy amount of people trying to buy tickets last week, or what was it, a few nights ago?
Yeah.
So, so the servers crashed for one thing. So, and for one thing, the servers crashed, and I only remember that happening on a few rare occasions for Marvel movies. One being Infinity War. Like I remember Infinity War when it was coming right before it came out, or when tickets went on sale. All the people trying to get the Infinity War tickets, just like it was very hard to get tickets to go see Infinity War. And then, the day of when I went to go see Infinity War, my brother, still a long line, and still it was a long way getting into seeing a movie. The same thing with Endgame. In order to see Endgame, we had to go to a very late night showing. So, yeah. But what really surprised me, or what really didn't surprise me, or kind of in the same bag, is that the people who did buy tickets to see No Way Home are now selling it on eBay for like over $1,000, $2,000. And people are essentially just scalping these tickets who could have been seen, who could have been grabbed by other people and actually gone and see the movie for like thousands of dollars, because people just be greedy. People are greedy. So, and especially when it's a big movie coming out, very greedy.
Yeah, that same thing happened actually with the same kind of thing happened with the recent generation of gaming consoles with the PS5s and the recent Xboxes. So it's like people just got them and then been like got a bunch of them and then resell them at a much higher price.
Yeah, this holiday season, I knew that getting a PS5 would be hard, and
it was already hard back last year anyway. So it's like now it's going to be extra hard too.
And I looked out because I just happened to put my name in a PlayStation poll of lottery or something like that, and my name was selected, and I got a PS5 because of that. Because and I had to go and buy the PS5, which still took a lot of money. But still, I'm happy that I have my PS5 and stuff like that too. But at the same time, I'm hearing things about having how people have just got the box for the PS5 and they're selling it for like $500, $600, and people go and grab the box and they find out that it's just literally the box. There's nothing else in it. People just buy $500, $600 just to buy an empty box.
Yeah, people just getting scammed big time.
And what is it? And people do put up sale for the PS5 for like almost like close to $2,000. So people will buy all this stuff because people are greedy. But yeah, it definitely feels like a lot more care could have been put into this whole notion of, we definitely should have done this stuff like way before the holidays, because one, doing it like literally, what is it, a month before, a few weeks before, like literally 2 weeks before the film comes out, it definitely does feel like, we should have done this way before the holidays and stuff like that too. Like maybe a month before the actual film came out. But of course, that gets people buzzing to go see the movie and stuff like that too. So it definitely feels like, from a business standpoint, it gets more people to buy the tickets. But from a personal standpoint, it's very scummy that people will just buy these tickets and then suddenly just put them on line for like $1,000 to $2,000 like per ticket just to buy essentially a $20 ticket.
Mm-hmm.
Like imagine going on eBay and spending like close to $3,000 just to buy a $20 ticket. Like
Exactly, yeah.
Like,
Mm-hmm.
and so, scammers, I mean, scalpers really are always going to be around here, but don't
I mean, that's the thing though. Like they're buying these tickets, but it could equally be just like it could be as scammy as like someone paying $500 to someone on eBay or whatever for a PS5 and only getting the box. So it could be like where someone will get the ticket and then they'll just send like a fake QR code or something or whatever. So they can still find a way to have the ticket to make it seem like they can keep selling it.
Yeah.
And then what will happen is that person who did it is going to actually end up going see the movie anyway. But they just wanted to make some extra money off of it too.
Yeah. And, and that's another thing is like nowadays there's no real physical tickets anymore. It's like my brother and I, when we went to go see Ghostbusters Afterlife, we got them online because of the the online order and whatnot. And
especially with some theaters, you can actually reserve your seats too. So it's not like you're just getting a ticket and then having to actually get there early enough to find a good enough seat.
No, that's another thing. It's like a reserved seating too. It's like when the pandemic really struck, and the pandemic was really coming, like it was really making the theaters roll up, roll slow, roll back open slowly. And I still see them too. It's like there's still reserved seating in some theaters. It's like
reserved seating has actually been something that I know AMC. Well, especially a lot of the ones that have like the that sort of like setting option where you can kind of eat some food, get some food served to you while you're also watching the film. But I know AMC at least has been kind of doing a lot more of that reserved seating even before the pandemic started, to my knowledge.
The reserved seating has always been there. It's just that it's more along the lines of, please click this seat if you want this seat or something like that. That's essentially reserved seating in my eyes, even though it's essentially just, I mean, even when you buy a ticket online and to go see a movie or a show, that's still reserved seating because you just reserved that seat to go and.
Well, yes and no, because with specific reserved seating, you do pick the specific seat you want. If you just simply buy a ticket and then you can just walk in, essentially that means any of those seats are fair game.
Yeah.
So it's like you could get your ticket and be like, okay, I'm going to go see it. Then you walk in the theater and it's like, oh, wow, all the seats I would have wanted have been taken now. So I'm forced to now sit in the front and then crunch my neck up like this to watch the movie.
Yeah. Which always has been a fun, because that has only been happened to me twice.
Same, yeah. Like
actually 3 times. No, was it 3? No, yeah, twice. Once when I went to see First Class in theaters, it was way up in like this. And the other time, oh no, it happened 3 times. Okay, once to see X-Men First Class to see because I happened like this, to watch it like where the movie was. Mm-hmm. 2, the Avengers when my my brother and I went to go see the Avengers like when it came out, and there was no
the first Avengers movie or
the first Avengers movie. No seats whatsoever when you walk in, so you had to sit down on the alley at the alley seat. I mean, not the alley seat, like the actual alley steps.
Like like those little stairs and
gotcha. And just watch the movie like that. And sure enough, and of course we kind of like entered the movie right as it started, so it's like all dark and whatnot, and you can't really see anything. And by the time Black Widow is like escaping from that general guy. It's like, oh, suddenly it's like we could see something. It was like, oh, there's some seats. Like, go and sit down there. So it definitely felt like one of those things. And the third time that happened was actually a couple of years ago when I went to see Child's Play with my best friend. And we happened to be in a very, like, up close to the, like, thing because all the seats in back were essentially all gone. So it was either the front or try and figure out a place to sit in the back. So sitting up front is not the best fun.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, like I've only done that twice, and that was for on a Thursday night premiere night of Infinity War. So because and funny enough, I already had plans to go and see it with a friend on like Friday afternoon, but I was just like, you know what? I can't wait. I'm just gonna go ahead and go see it myself early. So so it was all an impulse. So I just went on Thursday night and I'm like, oh wow, it's barely any seats available except for like one's like literally front row, like very very front row, like first row. So I'm
Yeah.
like, okay, so I can kind of see what Thanos is doing there. Oh, okay, oh, you're over there now. So and then the second one was for Batman v Superman. But that wasn't as bad. It was kind of more like I was to decide how to be like kind of more like this ish.
Yeah.
But yeah.
But what really is screwy is that a lot of these tickets were also IMAX tickets too. So, and I do remember it being an IMAX like stuff like that too. So, imagine going to see an IMAX movie and then finding out your ticket is like literally sold out, and then the only ticket that they have available is like really up front. And I've been to one IMAX theater once with my class years ago in high school. We went to see the Polar Express, and it wasn't it was an enjoyable experience to see an IMAX, but at the same time, I thought that was under. Like, hey, here,
it's just like so it was like trash day here today. And so yeah, I think it's just I think it's my dad pushing up the trash stuff.
Oh, okay. Yeah, all I just heard was rumbling. I'm like, does that sound like thunder?
I was like, should I say something? Should I just let this go and see what happens?
I should be like, anyway. But yeah, an IMAX theater is like really, really big and really, really loud too. So it's like,
oh yeah.
Imagine trying to get a seat, you're seated back, and then suddenly it's like the seat that's like there is like literally up in front. And that's another thing is that a lot of these theaters are loud. So if you're up in front, you're practically getting tinnitus just sitting there for like at least 2 hours, give or take. Sometimes even like 2.5 hours, depending on the movie. So, in the words of the great M. Shame on you for doing that stuff, Scott.
Yeah. Shame on you.
Hit them all with an umbrella.
Yeah, just like take out the umbrella and be like, okay, let's go to town. Oh, bam.
Yeah. Hey, we wrapped it up with the Spider-Man. We'll talk about Spider-Man, ending up with a Spider-Man quote. Shit.
Also, there's one more thing that the Spider-Man film's gonna need. They're gonna need more J. Jonah Jameson. Also, they need more photos of Spider-Man.
But yeah, that was and before we wrap up, and this is sort of like recommendations of the week. I just finished watching Chucky, the series. So the series is now fully on Peacock. If you do have Peacock, you can actually watch it. Watch the first episode to its season finale, which is now going to season 2. And you have a recommendation too, because you just talked to me before that and too. So what's your recommendation?
So my recommendation is Dexter New Blood. So I've basically only seen the first episode because one, I'm waiting for them to put all their episodes out, and then I'll just get Showtime and then just like binge it all. But a great thing that Showtime actually has done is, and they've been doing this I think for a little while with some of their shows. It's like they put the season premiere or I guess the series premiere technically episode on their YouTube channel on Showtime on the Showtime YouTube channel for free to watch. So I'm just like, I literally just stumbled onto it by accident too. So I'm like, okay, I'm gonna give this a watch, and it is such a fantastic return to form for the character of Dexter.
Yeah,
like it basically feels like I'm watching Dexter from one of the earlier seasons, but then also but also then the fact that it's like this is a Dexter post season 8, post his faking his death there. But it feels good. Like it doesn't feel like it's, it doesn't necessarily feel like it's trying to explain away the weird way it ended. It feels like it is trying to be its own thing.
Entity, yeah.
While kind of addressing what happened in the past.
Yeah, they're still addressing the elephant in the room, but it's also doing its own thing. That's still like still kind of like goes back to its old roots of Dexter being Dexter, and
exactly. And yeah, it has some great cinematography.
Oh
and
yeah,
it's got some really good actors. Clancy Brown's in it. He doesn't show up in the first episode, but well, he is in trailers for the later episodes. And I mean, anything with Clancy Brown, he's going to be fantastic in it for sure. So,
oh yes. But yeah, those are recommendations for the week. Oddly enough, both horror-related things. Well, not I wouldn't say Dexter is a horror show per se, but it does involve a serial killer. But it's
I'd say in terms of like technically speaking, Dexter can kind of be just because of a lot of the elements it does deal with.
yeah.
I would actually argue it is kind of horror-esque because of how it is more grounded to a degree with what it deals with. It's more like the horror of humanity in a sense than say a possessed toy doll.
Yeah, that goes on a killing rampage because why not? All right, that was Downstage for Bryan Hayden for this week. I hope you all enjoyed the episode, but yeah, be safe, be well, and have a good week, everybody.